The starship Horizon's Edge moved through the darkness of space like a silver needle threading through black fabric. Inside the command deck, Commander Jake Morrison stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the viewport as a planet came into view. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The world below seemed to be made of crystal and light, with cities that sparkled like diamonds scattered across its surface. Jake was 35 years old, tall and lean with dark hair that was starting to show gray at the temples. He had been in the Space Corps for 15 years, but this mission was different from all the others. This time, he was not going to explore or fight. He was going to talk. He was going to represent all of humanity in front of an alien empire that could destroy Earth with a single fleet. Next to him stood Dr. Lisa Hayes, a woman in her early 40s with red hair pulled back in a practical bun. She was the best linguist Earth had, and she had spent 2 years learning everything she could about the Veltharan language and culture. On his other side was Carlos Martinez, the security chief, a broad-shouldered man who never seemed to relax completely. His hand always rested near his weapon, even though they all knew that if things went wrong, a single pistol would not save them. The communication officer turned toward Jake. Her name was Amy Chen, and she looked nervous. Everyone on the ship was nervous. They had every right to be. "Commander, we are receiving a message from the surface," Amy said. "They are giving us permission to land." "They are sending coordinates to the Royal Palace," Jake nodded. "Take us down." Nice and smooth. The ship descended through the atmosphere. Jake watched as the crystal cities grew larger. He could see enormous towers that seemed to grow naturally from the ground, like trees made of glass. Bridges of light connected the buildings. Flying vehicles moved through the air in perfect patterns, never colliding, never hesitating. The Veltharan Empire controlled nearly a third of known space. They had technology that made human achievements look like children playing with stones. But they had rules, ancient customs that they followed without question. That was why Earth had a chance. The Veltharans respected the old ways, and one of those ways said that every species deserved a hearing before the throne. The Horizon's Edge landed in a courtyard so large that the entire ship looked like a toy inside it. The ground beneath them was smooth and white like polished marble, but it glowed with a soft inner light. All around the courtyard stood alien figures, tall and elegant, watching the human ship with eyes that reflected light like mirrors. Jake took a deep breath. "This is it. Lisa, Carlos, you are with me. Everyone else stays on the ship unless I call for you." They walked down the landing ramp together. The air outside was warm and smelled like flowers Jake could not name. The gravity was almost the same as Earth, which was a relief. Jake had been on worlds where each step felt like lifting weights. A group of Veltharans approached them. They were beautiful and strange at the same time. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with long limbs and graceful movements. Their skin had a faint silver shimmer, and their eyes were large and almond-shaped, colored in shades of blue and purple that seemed to shift in the light. They wore flowing robes in deep colors, decorated with symbols that probably meant things Jake did not understand. The one in front bowed slightly. When he spoke, his voice was musical, like someone singing while they talked. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am Lord Catherine, Chief Advisor to Queen Sylvan. Her Majesty has granted you the honor of a personal audience. This is rare. You should understand the significance." Lisa stepped forward and bowed in the Veltharan manner, her right hand over her heart. She spoke in their language, the words flowing from her mouth with only a slight accent. Jake did not understand what she said, but he saw Lord Catherine's eyes widen slightly. "Your linguist speaks well," Lord Catherine said, switching to English. "Come. The Queen is waiting." They followed him through corridors that seemed to be carved from single pieces of crystal. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, illuminating everything in a soft glow. Other Veltharans stopped to stare at them as they passed. Some looked curious. Some looked suspicious. A few looked almost hostile. Carlos leaned close to Jake and whispered, "I am counting at least 50 guards that I can see, probably twice that many hidden. They are not taking chances with us." Jake nodded slightly. He had expected that. Humanity was new to this part of space, unknown and potentially dangerous. The Veltharans would be fools to trust them completely, and the Veltharans were not fools. They entered a chamber so vast that Jake could not see the far wall. The ceiling above them showed the stars, though Jake knew they were inside a building. Some kind of projection, probably. Or maybe the ceiling was actually transparent. Hundreds of Veltharans filled the room, all dressed in elaborate robes, all watching the humans with intense interest. At the far end of the chamber, on a throne that seemed to be made of frozen starlight, sat Queen Sylvienne. Jake had seen pictures and videos, but nothing had prepared him for seeing her in person. She was taller than the others, perhaps 7.5 feet, with the same silver shimmer skin but marked with faint patterns that moved slowly across her arms and face like living tattoos. Her eyes were the deep purple of a night sky, and they seemed to glow with their own light. Her hair, if it could be called hair, flowed down her back in silver-white strands that moved as if underwater. She wore robes of deep midnight blue, covered in symbols that Jake was sure meant important things. But what struck Jake most was not her appearance. It was the way she looked at him. Her eyes locked onto his the moment he entered the room, and they did not look away. There was something in that gaze, something intense and searching, that made Jake feel exposed, as if she could see right through him. Lord Kethrin led them forward. When they were 20 feet from the throne, he stopped and bowed deeply. Lisa and Carlos bowed. Jake bowed as well, though every instinct told him to keep his eyes on potential threats. "Your Majesty," Lord Kethrin said, "I present Commander Jake Morrison of Earth, leader of this diplomatic mission." The Queen rose from her throne in one fluid movement. She descended the steps toward them, and Jake noticed that every single person in the chamber seemed to tense. Even Lord Kethrin looked uncertain. She stopped directly in front of Jake. They were close enough that he could have reached out and touched her. Her eyes, those glowing purple eyes, studied his face with an intensity that made his heart beat faster. "Commander Morrison," she said. Her voice was like music, deep and rich, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. "Welcome to Velthar Prime. We have waited long to meet your species." Jake found his voice, though it took effort. "Your Majesty, thank you for receiving us. Earth sends its greetings and its hope for friendship between our peoples." The Queen tilted her head slightly, a gesture that reminded Jake of a bird studying something interesting. "Friendship, yes, that would be good." She paused, and Jake saw something flicker across her face, an emotion he could not name. "You are not what I expected." "I hope that is a good thing, Your Majesty," Jake said carefully. "Time will tell." She turned and walked back to her throne, and Jake felt like he could breathe again. "We will begin the formal negotiations tomorrow. Tonight you are our guests. Lord Kethrin will show you to your quarters. They have been prepared according to your biological needs." Lord Kethrin bowed again. "Your Majesty is generous." As they were being led from the chamber, Jake glanced back once. The Queen was sitting on her throne again, but she was not looking at her court or her advisors. She was looking at him, and there was something in her eyes that Jake could not read, something that made him deeply uneasy without knowing why. That night, in the quarters they had been given, Lisa sat with Jake going over cultural notes. The rooms were beautiful, with walls that showed scenes of alien landscapes and furniture that adjusted itself to human proportions. "Did you notice how she looked at you?" Lisa asked quietly. Jake nodded. "Hard to miss." "What does it mean?" Lisa shook her head. "I do not know. In all my research, I never came across anything about that kind of behavior. The Veltharans are usually very controlled, very formal. The Queen acting like that, focusing on you so intensely, it is not normal." Carlos entered from the next room. "The security here is tight, but they are not being aggressive about it. They are watching us, but not like they expect us to attack, more like they are protecting something valuable." "Protecting us or protecting themselves from us?" Jake asked. "Hard to say. Maybe both." Jake stood and walked to the window. Outside, the crystal city glowed in the darkness, and 3 moons hung in the sky like pearls. Somewhere in this palace, the Queen was probably making decisions that would affect billions of lives. He wondered what she was thinking. He wondered why she had looked at him that way. He had come here to secure Earth's future, to negotiate for humanity's place among the stars. But something about this mission felt different now, felt like it was moving in a direction he had not anticipated. Tomorrow, the real negotiations would begin. Tomorrow, he would find out what the Veltharans truly wanted from Earth, and what price they would demand for accepting humanity into their civilization. Jake just hoped he was ready for whatever was coming. The negotiation chamber was smaller than the throne room, but no less impressive. The walls were transparent, showing the city beyond and the stars above. A circular table made of some dark, polished material sat in the center of the room. Around it sat the most powerful figures in the Veltharan Empire, and across from them sat 3 humans who represented an entire species. Jake sat in the center, with Lisa on his right and Carlos on his left. Facing them were Lord Kethrin, several other advisors whose names Jake was still learning, and 2 military commanders whose presence made Carlos nervous. And at the head of the table sat Queen Sylvian, watching everything with those glowing purple eyes. The negotiations had been going on for 3 hours. They were discussing trade routes, resource sharing, and territorial boundaries. The Velthorans wanted access to certain minerals found in Earth's solar system. In return, they offered technology and protection. It sounded fair on the surface, but Jake knew that every detail mattered. One wrong agreement could put Earth in a position of dependency or debt that would last for generations. Lisa was doing most of the technical talking, explaining what Earth could offer and what it needed in return. Jake spoke when policy decisions needed to be made, always careful to sound confident but not aggressive, interested but not desperate. It was a delicate balance. The Queen had been mostly silent, letting her advisors handle the details. But Jake noticed that she kept looking at him. Not constantly, but regularly. Her eyes would drift from whoever was speaking and settle on him for a few seconds before moving away. Each time it happened, he felt that same strange sensation, like something was pulling at him from inside his chest. Lord Kethrin was speaking now, explaining the Empire's position on military alliances. We would expect Earth to provide support vessels in times of conflict, proportional to your industrial capacity. Nothing that would strain your resources, but enough to show commitment to the coalition. Jake leaned forward. Before we can agree to any military commitments, we need clarity on what conflicts we would be supporting. Earth has no interest in getting involved in wars that do not concern us. One of the military commanders, a stern-looking Veltharan with silver markings across his face, spoke up. Every war concerns everyone in the coalition. That is the point of an alliance. With respect, Jake said carefully, humanity has learned hard lessons about getting pulled into conflicts without understanding the reasons behind them. We need to know that we are joining something that shares our values. The commander looked ready to argue, but the Queen raised one hand slightly, and he fell silent immediately. Jake noticed that. One small gesture and everyone stopped talking. That was real power. Commander Morrison makes a fair point, the Queen said, her voice filling the room despite not being loud. Trust must be earned on both sides. Perhaps we should take a different approach to this discussion. Lord Kethrin nodded. Your Majesty is wise. Shall we move to the topic of cultural exchange programs? The Queen did not answer. She was staring at Jake again, but this time she did not look away. Seconds passed. The room grew quiet. Jake felt sweat forming on the back of his neck. What was happening? Your Majesty? Lord Kethrin said quietly. The Queen stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. Everyone in the room tensed. Carlos's hand moved toward his weapon before he caught himself and stopped. I must speak, the Queen said. Her voice had changed, become rougher, more emotional. There is something I must say according to our customs. Lord Kethrin looked alarmed. Your Majesty, perhaps this is not the time. It is precisely the time, the Queen said. To wait would be to violate the old laws. She walked around the table, her robes flowing behind her. She stopped directly in front of Jake. He started to stand, but she gestured for him to remain seated. Up close, he could see that her hands were trembling slightly. Commander Jake Morrison of Earth, she said, and her voice carried throughout the chamber, formal and powerful. I speak now before my court, and before the witnesses of 2 worlds. Jake had no idea what was coming, but every instinct told him it was important. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath. The Queen closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and looked directly into Jake's eyes. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, but filled with emotion that Jake could hear even if he did not understand it. I wish you were my mate, human. The words hung in the air like a physical thing. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The universe itself seemed to pause. Then chaos erupted. Lord Kethrin shot to his feet, his face showing shock. Your Majesty, what are you saying? Several of the advisors began talking at once, their voices rising in pitch. The military commanders looked between the Queen and Jake with expressions that ranged from confusion to anger. Other Veltharans who had been standing around the room moved forward, their voices joining the growing noise. Lisa grabbed Jake's arm, her fingers digging in hard. Jake, she just... I think she just proposed to you. In their culture, this is huge. Carlos was on his feet now, his body positioned between Jake and the nearest Veltharans, his hand definitely on his weapon this time. Commander, we need to leave now, but Jake could not move. He was staring at the Queen, who was staring back at him with an expression that was part defiant, part terrified, and part something else that he could not name. She had just said something that had shocked her entire court. She had said it in front of everyone, and she was not taking it back. Your Majesty, Lord Kethrin was saying, his voice strained. Surely you spoke in error. The heat of negotiations, perhaps you misspoke. I did not misspeak, the Queen said, not looking away from Jake. I felt the soul resonance the moment he entered the throne room yesterday. I have felt it grow stronger every moment since. Our law is clear. When a member of the royal line feels such a connection, they must speak it aloud before the court within one full rotation of the primary sun, or they will suffer spiritual decay. I have spoken it. It is done. Jake found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. Your Majesty, I do not understand what is happening. The Queen finally looked away from him, addressing her court. Leave us, all of you. I will speak with the human commander alone. Your Majesty, that would be unwise, Lord Kethrin said. I did not ask for your advice. I gave you a command. The Queen's voice had become cold, hard as steel. Leave. Now. The Veltharans began filing out, though many of them looked back with expressions of shock and anger. Lord Kethrin was the last to leave, and he paused at the door. Your Majesty, the court will demand answers. They will have them in time. Go. The door closed, leaving just Jake, Lisa, Carlos, and the Queen in the chamber. Lisa stood up slowly. Your Majesty, perhaps I should stay to help translate any cultural nuances. The Queen shook her head. You speak our language well, but this is not about language. This is about something deeper. I need to speak with Commander Morrison alone. You and your companion will wait outside. You have my word that no harm will come to him. Lisa looked at Jake. He nodded slightly. It is okay. Wait outside. Jake, this could be a trap, Carlos said quietly. If they wanted to trap us, they would not need to do it like this. Go. I will be fine. Carlos and Lisa left reluctantly. The door closed behind them, and suddenly Jake was alone with an alien queen who had just declared that she wanted him as her mate, in front of her entire court. The Queen walked to the transparent wall and looked out at the city. For a long moment she said nothing. Jake waited, not sure if he should speak or stay silent. Finally she spoke, her back still to him. You must think we are insane. Or that I am insane. I think I am very confused, Jake said honestly. That is fair. She turned to face him. Do you know anything about Veltharan bonding customs? Only what little we have learned in the last 2 years of studying your culture. Then you do not know much. She walked closer, though she maintained a respectful distance. When a Veltharan of royal blood feels a soul resonance with another being, it is not a choice. It is not something we control. It simply happens. Some of us go our entire lives without feeling it. Some feel it multiple times. But when it comes, we must acknowledge it or we become sick. Our people believe that denying such a connection tears at the fabric of our spirit. And you felt this. Connection with me? Jake asked carefully. From the moment you walked into the throne room, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was impossible, that it must be an error. You are an alien, from a species we barely know. But the feeling only grew stronger. She looked away. I have ruled my people for 43 years. I have fought wars, made peace, built cities, and destroyed enemies. I have always been in control, but this, I cannot control this. Jake stood up slowly. Your Majesty, I am honored, but I am here on a diplomatic mission. I represent my entire species. Getting involved in something like this could complicate everything. I know, she said, and there was real pain in her voice. I know that my words have already complicated everything, but I could not stay silent. The law demanded I speak, and I have never broken our laws. She met his eyes again. I am not asking you to accept. I'm not even asking you to understand. I simply needed you to know the truth. What happens next is The communication array in Jake's quarters crackled to life at 3 a.m. He jolted awake, his training kicking in immediately. The face that appeared on the screen was Admiral Patricia Green, and she looked furious. Commander Morrison, what in the hell is going on down there? Jake rubbed his face, trying to wake up fully. Admiral, it is complicated. Complicated? That is what you are calling it? The Admiral's voice rose. We are getting reports from 12 different sources that the Veltharan Queen declared you as her mate in front of the entire royal court. The news is spreading through the diplomatic channels like wildfire. The Galactic Coalition is demanding explanations. Half the ambassadors think this is some kind of power play, and the other half think you have lost your mind. Admiral, I did not do anything. She made the declaration on her own. I was as surprised as everyone else. Another face appeared on the screen next to the Admiral. Ambassador Henry Chen, the head of Earth's diplomatic corps, looked tired and stressed. Commander, regardless of how it happened, we now have a situation. The Queen's declaration has political implications that go far beyond personal relationships. We need you to extract yourself from this immediately. Extract myself? Jake stood up and began pacing. How exactly am I supposed to do that? She is the queen of an empire that could crush us. I cannot just tell her she made a mistake. Then find a diplomatic way to decline, Ambassador Chen said. Make it about human customs or biological incompatibility. Find an excuse that lets her save face while removing you from the equation. Lisa's voice came from the doorway. She had been sleeping in the next room and had obviously heard the communication. With respect, sir, that might not be possible. I have been researching Veltharan customs all night. If the Queen made a formal declaration of sole resonance, there is no polite way to simply refuse it. Doing so would be considered a grave insult. Admiral Green's expression darkened. So, what are you saying? That Commander Morrison has to marry an alien queen? I am saying that we are dealing with a cultural situation we do not fully understand, and making the wrong move could destroy any chance of Earth joining the coalition. Lisa moved into view of the camera. The Veltharans take these bonds very seriously. To them, it is not just personal, it is spiritual. If we handle this wrong, we could turn them from potential allies into enemies. Ambassador Chen rubbed his temples. This is a diplomatic nightmare. We have other species asking if humanity is trying to infiltrate Veltharan leadership through seduction. We have trade negotiations that were almost complete now frozen because everyone wants to see how this plays out. I did not seduce anyone, Jake said firmly. I was doing my job. I believe you, Commander, but perception matters in diplomacy. The ambassador sighed. Here is what we need you to do. Stall. Do not accept, do not refuse. Keep things in a state of negotiation while we figure out the best way forward. Can you do that? Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded slightly. I can try, sir. Good. And Commander? Be very, very careful. We cannot afford to lose you, but we also cannot afford to lose this opportunity with the Veltharans. Walk the line. The communication ended. Jake sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling exhausted despite just waking up. This is insane, he said quietly. It gets worse, Carlos said from the other doorway. He had been on watch, monitoring security. I have been listening to the palace guards. Some of them are loyal to the Queen and think this whole thing is romantic or destined or whatever. But others think she has lost her mind and is making decisions that will damage the Empire. There is talk of a faction forming against her. A faction? You mean like a rebellion? Not yet, but the foundation for one. Carlos crossed his arms. There is a prince, her cousin, named Tharan. He has been pushing for more aggressive expansion policies, things the Queen has been blocking. He is using this situation to undermine her authority. He is saying she has become emotionally unstable, that she is letting feelings for an alien compromise her judgment. Lisa's face went pale. If he manages to turn enough of the court against her, he could call for a vote of no confidence. In extreme cases, Veltharan law allows for the forced removal of a ruler who is deemed unfit. Jake stood up again. We need to talk to the Queen. We need to know what we are dealing with. Getting an audience might be difficult, Lisa said. After yesterday's declaration, Lord Catherine made it clear that the Queen was not to be disturbed until she was ready to address the court formally. Then we will wait until she is ready. But we cannot just sit here while this situation falls apart around us. The morning brought more complications. Jake's team was confined to their quarters, though it was described as being for their own protection. Guards stood outside their doors, polite but firm. When Jake tried to leave to meet with some of the lower-ranking Veltheran officials, he was told it would not be appropriate given the current situation. They were prisoners, even if nobody was using that word. Around midday, Lord Kethrin arrived. He looked like he had not slept, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. He dismissed the guards and entered the room, closing the door behind him. "Commander Morrison, we need to talk." Jake gestured to a chair. "I am listening." Lord Kethrin sat down heavily. "The Queen's declaration has created a crisis. The court is divided. Half believe she has found her true bond and should be supported. The other half believes she has been compromised by alien influence and should be removed from power for the good of the Empire. What do you believe?" Jake asked. The advisor was quiet for a moment. "I have served Queen Sylvan for 20 years. I have seen her lead our people through war and peace, through prosperity and hardship. She has never acted rashly. She has never let personal feelings cloud her judgment. But I have also never seen her behave the way she has these past 2 days. She is not eating. She barely sleeps. She spends hours in her private chambers refusing to see anyone." "That does not sound good," Carlos said. "It is not, and Prince Theron is using her weakness to gather support. He is calling for an ancient ritual, something that has not been invoked in over 200 years. Lord Kethrin looked directly at Jake. "He is calling for a trial of stars." Lisa gasped. "I read about that. It is a test of compatibility, is it not?" "More than that. It is a test of the bond itself." Lord Kethrin leaned forward. "If Prince Theron gathers enough support, he can force the Queen to prove that her bond with Commander Morrison is legitimate. They would both have to undergo 3 trials, tests that push them to their absolute limits. If they succeed, the bond is recognized as true, and all opposition must cease. If they fail, the Queen is considered unfit to rule and must abdicate." Jake felt cold. "And if we refuse to participate in these trials, then the Queen is removed from power immediately, and Prince Theron almost certainly takes the throne. And I can tell you, Commander, that Prince Theron has no love for humanity. If he becomes Emperor, any chance of Earth joining the coalition dies with it. More than that, he has advocated for aggressive expansion into your region of space. Under his rule, humanity would not be invited to join the Empire. You would be conquered by it." The room was silent for several long seconds. "How long do we have?" Jake asked finally. "Prince Theron is gathering support now. He will make his formal challenge within 2 days. After that, the trials must begin within 1 week, or the Queen loses by default." Lord Kethrin stood. "I am telling you this because I believe you are an honorable man, Commander Morrison. I do not know if the Queen's feelings are genuine or some kind of temporary madness brought on by stress. But I know that if she falls, many people will suffer. Not just on my world, but on yours as well." After Lord Kethrin left, the 3 humans sat in silence. Finally, Lisa spoke. "If you do this, Jake, if you agree to these trials, you are risking everything. Your career, your life, maybe even Earth's future. If you fail, we lose the Queen as an ally and gain a hostile empire on our borders." "And if I refuse?" Jake asked. "The same thing happens, just faster." Carlos shook his head. "This is crazy. We came here to negotiate a trade agreement. Now we are talking about magical trials and alien marriage bonds. Soul resonance bonds," Lisa corrected. "And they are not magical, just something we do not understand yet." Jake walked to the window. Below, the crystal city sparkled in the sunlight. Somewhere in this palace, the Queen was probably dealing with the same impossible situation, trying to figure out how to save her throne and her people while dealing with feelings she claimed she could not control. He thought about his duty to Earth, his responsibility to billions of humans who were depending on him to make the right choices. But he also thought about the Queen's face when she had made her declaration, the vulnerability and strength mixed together. She had risked everything to follow her own customs and laws, even knowing it would bring chaos. "I need to talk to her," Jake said. "Before I make any decision, I need to understand what she really wants." Not what the court wants or what politics demand. What she wants. That might not be possible, Lisa said. Then I will make it possible. I am not going into any trials blind, and I am not making decisions without all the information. Jake turned to face them. Carlos, can you get a message to the Queen's personal guard? Maybe. Why? Jake walked further into the observatory, the starlight casting strange shadows across the floor. The Queen watched him approach, her expression unreadable in the dim light. Why me? Jake asked, deciding to start with the most basic question. You must meet hundreds of people, other rulers, warriors, scholars. Why would you feel this connection to a human you barely know? The Queen smiled sadly. Do you think I have not asked myself the same question 1,000 times since you arrived? I have no answer that will satisfy you. Soul resonance does not follow logic. It is not about shared interests or compatible personalities. It is about something deeper, something my people believe exists beyond the physical realm. I do not believe in souls, Jake said. Neither did I, until 2 days ago. The Queen turned back to the stars. I was raised to be practical, Commander. I learned strategy and warfare, economics and law. I was taught that emotions were tools to be controlled, not forces that controlled you. And then you walked into my throne room and everything I believed about myself turned out to be wrong. Jake moved to stand beside her, looking up at the alien constellations. Tell me about the bond. What does it actually mean? It means that on some level I cannot explain, I recognize you. Not as a stranger or even as a friend, but as something more fundamental. It is like looking into a mirror and seeing not your reflection but your completion. She paused. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds insane or poetic or both, but that is the only way I can describe it. And if I was Veltharan, if I was one of your own people, would this be easier? If you were Veltharan, we would already be bonded. The court would celebrate and life would continue. But you are not Veltharan. You are something new, something unknown, and that terrifies them. She looked at him. It terrifies me too, if I am honest. Jake was quiet for a moment. Lord Catherine told me about Prince Theron. About the Trial of Stars. Of course he did. Catherine has always been loyal. The Queen's expression hardened. My cousin has been waiting for an opportunity like this for years. He believes I am too soft, too cautious. He wants to expand the empire through conquest, to take by force what I would rather gain through diplomacy. This situation with you has given him the perfect excuse to challenge me. What are these trials? What would we have to face? The Queen walked to a control panel on the wall and touched it. Holographic images appeared in the air between them, showing 3 different scenes. The first trial is the trial of mind. We would be placed in a shared consciousness. Our thoughts and memories merged completely. There would be no secrets, no hidden parts of ourselves. We would see each other as we truly are, without any masks or defenses. Many bonded pairs fail this trial because they cannot handle the intimacy of it. Jake stared at the hologram showing 2 figures surrounded by swirling lights. You would see everything? All my memories? Everything. And you would see mine. Every moment of joy, every mistake, every fear I have ever had. It is the most vulnerable a Veltharan can be. She touched the panel again and the hologram changed. The second trial is the trial of body. We would face physical challenges together, combat against dangerous creatures or obstacles that require perfect coordination. This tests whether we can protect each other, whether we can function as a unit when our lives depend on it. The new hologram showed 2 figures fighting back-to-back against shadowy opponents. Jake noticed that both figures looked exhausted, wounded. And the third trial? He asked. The Queen hesitated before touching the panel again. The trial of spirit. This one is the most dangerous. We would be exposed to a substance that brings our deepest fears to life, makes them real enough to harm us. We would have to face these fears together and overcome them. Many who enter this trial do not come out the same. Some do not come out at all. Jake looked at the hologram showing 2 figures surrounded by shifting, nightmarish shapes. People have died in these trials? Yes, the trials are not meant to be easy. They are meant to prove that the bond is real, strong enough to survive anything. If a couple cannot pass all 3 trials, the bond is considered false and the relationship is forbidden. And if we refuse to participate, then I lose my throne, Theron becomes emperor, and your people lose any chance of peaceful integration into the coalition. Theron will see humanity as weak, ripe for conquest. Within a year, your worlds would be under attack. The Queen met his eyes. I would not ask this of you if there was another way. But there is not. Theron has outmaneuvered me. He has used our own laws against me. Jake turned away from the holograms and walked to the edge of the observatory, pressing his hand against the transparent wall. Beyond it, the city stretched out in every direction, millions of lives going about their business, unaware of the decisions being made above them. I have a duty to my people, he said quietly. Every choice I make affects billions of humans who trusted me to represent them. How can I agree to something like this? How can I risk everything on trials that might kill us both? You cannot, the Queen said from behind him. I would not ask you to. If you choose to refuse, I will understand. I will find another way to protect your people from Theron, even if it costs me everything. Jake turned to face her. What would it cost you, truly? The Queen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. I have ruled alone for 43 years, Commander Morrison. Do you know why? Because my first mate died in a war 30 years ago, and I swore I would never feel that kind of pain again. I closed myself off. I focused only on duty, on being the perfect queen. And I thought I was content with that life. She walked toward him slowly. Then you arrived, and suddenly I felt something I had forgotten existed. Hope, possibility, the chance to be more than just a ruler. For the first time in 3 decades, I felt alive. She stopped a few feet away from him. But I will not force you to share in that. I will not drag you into my personal crisis and pretend it is about politics. If you leave, if you return to Earth and forget all of this, I will bear the consequences alone. Jake studied her face in the starlight. He saw the strength there, the determination that had made her a queen. But he also saw the loneliness, the weight of decades spent putting duty before everything else, and he recognized it because he had been doing the same thing his entire adult life. I have been in the Space Corps for 15 years, he said. I have led missions, made difficult decisions, sent people into danger knowing some might not come back. I have always put the mission first, always chosen duty over personal feelings. My last relationship ended because I could not give enough of myself to it. I was too focused on work, on proving myself, on serving something bigger than me. That sounds familiar, the Queen said quietly. I am good at being a commander. I am good at the job, but I'm not sure I've ever been good at just being human. Jake looked up at the stars. Maybe that is why I volunteered for this mission. It was easier to come to an alien planet and negotiate with an empire than to stay on Earth and figure out who I was when I was not wearing a uniform. The Queen moved to stand beside him, both of them looking out at the galaxy. We are not so different, you and I. Both of us hiding behind our duties, both of us afraid of being vulnerable. So what do we do? Jake asked. I do not know. For the first time in my life, I truly do not know. She turned to look at him. But I know this. Whatever happens, whatever choice you make, I want you to make it for the right reasons, not because you feel obligated, or because you think it will help your mission. If we are going to face these trials together, I need to know that you are choosing to do it. Not for Earth, not for the Empire, but because you want to. Jake was quiet for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that was at stake. Finally, he spoke. I have a question for you, and I need you to answer it honestly. Ask. If I was not important to your politics, if I was just some random person with no diplomatic value, would you still want me here? The Queen did not hesitate. Yes, why? Because when I look at you, I do not see a diplomat or a representative or a political tool. I see someone who understands what it means to carry weight that never gets lighter. Someone who knows what it is like to make decisions that affect millions while feeling completely alone. Someone who puts duty first even when it tears them apart inside. She paused. I see someone like me, but also someone different enough that maybe, together, we could both learn to be more than just the roles we play. Jake felt something shift inside him, something he had been holding tight for a very long time starting to loosen. I am scared, he admitted. Not of the trials, or at least not just of them. I am scared of what it means if this is real. I am scared of letting someone see all of me, especially someone from a completely different world who I barely know. I am scared too, the Queen said, but maybe being scared together is better than being lonely alone. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars turn slowly overhead. Jake thought about his life back on Earth, about the empty apartment he lived in, about the friends he had lost touch with because he was always on another mission. He thought about what his future would look like if he went back now, if he walked away from all of this. It would be safe. The challenge came officially the next morning. Prince Theron stood before the assembled court, his voice carrying through the throne room with practiced authority. He was tall even for a Veltheran, with dark markings across his face that made him look aggressive and dangerous. "I invoke the ancient right of the Trial of Stars," he declared. "Queen Sylvan has claimed a soul resonance with an alien, a being we know nothing about from a species that has only just reached our borders. This is not the action of a rational ruler. This is the action of someone compromised by emotion and unfit to guide our empire." Murmurs ran through the court. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. Jake stood beside Sylvain, wearing formal diplomatic attire that Lisa had prepared for him. He kept his expression neutral, but his heart was pounding. Sylvan rose from her throne, her voice calm and steady. "You challenge my fitness to rule based on my following our oldest customs? The law requires that a royal declare soul resonance when it occurs. I have done exactly what tradition demands." "Tradition applies to bonds between our people," Theron countered, "not to aliens. You have twisted our laws to justify a personal obsession. The court has the right to verify that this bond is legitimate, that it is not simply a delusion that clouds your judgment." Lord Catherine stepped forward. "The prince has gathered the required support. 47 members of the court have signed the petition for a trial of stars. By law, the queen must either undergo the trials or abdicate her throne." Sylvan did not flinch. "I accept the challenge. Commander Jake Morrison and I will face the trials together. We will prove that this bond is true. And when you fail," Theron said with a cold smile, "I will lead this empire as it should be led, with strength, not weakness." The trials were scheduled to begin in 3 days. That gave Jake and Sylvan very little time to prepare, which was exactly what Theron wanted. The less time they had, the more likely they were to fail. Lisa spent those 3 days teaching Jake everything she had learned about Veltheran psychology and the trials. Carlos worked with the palace guard to ensure security, watching for any sign that Theron might try something underhanded. And Jake spent hours with Sylvan, talking, learning about each other, trying to build the connection they would need to survive what was coming. On the morning of the first trial, Jake stood in his quarters looking at himself in the mirror. He wore simple clothes provided by the palace, nothing that would interfere with the mental connection they were about to attempt. Lisa and Carlos stood behind him. "You do not have to do this," Lisa said quietly. "Even now you could walk away. Admiral Green has authorized me to extract you if necessary." Jake shook his head. "I am not leaving." "You know the risks," Carlos said. "The trial of mind is not just about seeing each other's memories. It is about merging consciousness. Some people who go through it come out changed, not entirely themselves anymore." "I know." Jake turned to face them. "But I have made my choice. Whatever happens, I need to see this through." The trial of mind took place in a chamber deep beneath the palace. The walls were made of some black material that seemed to absorb light. In the center of the room were 2 chairs facing each other, with a strange device positioned between them. Veltheran technicians moved around the equipment, making final adjustments. The court gathered to witness, filling the observation balconies above. Prince Theron sat in a place of honor, watching everything with sharp eyes. Jake could feel the weight of all those alien gazes on him, judging, waiting for him to fail. Sylvan entered from the opposite side of the chamber. She wore white robes that seemed to glow in the darkness. She met Jake's eyes across the room and nodded once. They had discussed what was coming. They had prepared as much as they could. Now it was time to face it. They sat in the chairs. A Veltheran technician approached and placed a circlet of silver metal on Jake's head. Another did the same to Sylvan. The metal felt cold against his skin. Lord Catherine stood between them, his voice formal. "The trial of mind will now begin. The candidates will merge consciousness for a period of 1 hour. If they can maintain the connection without psychological damage, they will pass this trial. If either mind rejects the other, or if the connection causes harm, they will fail." He stepped back. The technician activated the device. At first, Jake felt nothing. Then a tingling sensation spread through his skull, like electricity dancing across his brain. He gasped as the world around him started to fade, replaced by something else, something he could not quite describe. And then he was not alone in his own head anymore. Sylvan's presence flooded into him like water breaking through a dam. He felt her thoughts, her emotions, her memories all rushing at him at once. It was overwhelming, terrifying, too much information coming too fast. He saw her childhood, a small girl learning to fight with weapons taller than she was. He felt her fear during her first battle, the weight of command settling on her shoulders. He experienced her wedding day, the joy mixed with political calculation. And then he felt her grief, the crushing, endless grief when her mate died, leaving her alone. But she was experiencing him too. He felt her presence moving through his mind, seeing his own memories. His difficult childhood on Earth, growing up poor in a crowded city, his decision to join the military, desperate to prove himself, his rise through the ranks, each promotion making him more isolated, his failed relationships, his inability to let anyone get close, his loneliness so deep and persistent that he had stopped noticing it most days. They saw each other completely, every weakness, every fear, every moment of shame and pride. There was nowhere to hide, no way to pretend to be better than they were. They were laid bare before each other in a way that was more intimate than any physical touch could ever be. And Jake realized something. Despite everything, despite seeing all her flaws and mistakes, he did not want to pull away. He wanted to understand her more. He wanted to know how someone could carry so much weight and still stand tall. He wanted to learn from her strength. He felt her surprise at this thought, felt her own realization that she was not repulsed by what she saw in him either. His stubbornness in the face of impossible odds, his refusal to give up even when he probably should, his capacity for loyalty, even when it cost him personally. These were things she recognized, things she valued. Their minds began to sync, finding a rhythm together. Memories flowed back and forth, but now it was less chaotic, more like a conversation. They shared moments of joy, compared experiences of fear, found commonalities in places they never expected. Jake saw the sunrise through her eyes, understood why she loved that moment each day. The light spreading across the city represented hope, the promise that no matter how dark things got, dawn always came eventually. She saw him painting in his quarters late at night, using colors to express feelings he could not put into words. She understood that this was his form of meditation, his way of processing the weight of command. Time lost meaning. They could have been connected for minutes or days. The physical world had faded entirely, leaving only the pure experience of knowing and being known. And slowly, carefully, they began to build something new. Not a merging where they lost themselves, but a connection where they could remain individuals while still being linked. They found a balance, a way to share thoughts and emotions without being overwhelmed by them. When the device finally powered down and the connection broke, Jake gasped as if surfacing from deep water. He was back in his own head, but he was not entirely alone anymore. He could still feel Sylvan at the edges of his consciousness, a warm presence that reassured him she was there. Across from him, Sylvan was breathing hard, her eyes wide. But she was smiling, and Jake realized he was smiling too. Lord Kethrin stepped forward, checking readings on a device. The trial is complete. Both candidates have maintained consciousness and show no signs of psychological damage. The trial of mind has been passed. The court erupted in noise. Some cheered. Others protested. Prince Theron sat very still, his expression unreadable. Jake stood on shaky legs. Sylvan did the same. They reached for each other instinctively, their hands meeting in the space between them. "I saw you," Jake said quietly. "I saw you too," Sylvan replied. "All of you. And you are still here, so are you." They had passed the first trial, but two more remained, and Jake knew they would only get harder from here. The trial of body took place 2 days later in an arena that had been used for centuries to test Veltharan warriors. Jake and Sylvan stood side by side, both wearing light armor and carrying weapons. Jake had a blade that felt comfortable in his hand, similar to ones he had trained with on Earth. Sylvan carried a staff that could separate into 2 shorter weapons. The court watched from protected balconies. Prince Theron leaned forward, anticipating their failure. Lord Kethrin's voice echoed through the arena. The trial of body tests whether the bonded pair can protect each other in combat, can function as a single unit when their lives depend on it. You will face 3 waves of automated combat drones, each wave more difficult than the last. You must survive for 15 minutes. Begin. Gates opened on opposite sides of the arena. Machines rolled out, humanoid in shape but made of metal and circuits. They moved fast, their weapons already active. The day before the final trial, Jake stood in the medical bay while doctors treated his wounds from the trial of body. The cut on his arm was deep but clean, and the Veltharan medical technology was impressive. Within hours it would be fully healed. Sylvain sat nearby, her own injuries being tended to by another doctor. They had barely spoken since the trial, both too exhausted to do more than rest, but Jake could still feel her presence in his mind, a constant reminder of the connection they had built. Lord Kethrin entered the medical bay, his expression troubled. "I need to speak with both of you." Jake and Sylvain exchanged glances. "What is wrong?" Sylvain asked. "Prince Theron has been making moves behind the scenes. He has convinced several military commanders to pledge their loyalty to him if you fail the final trial. He is preparing to take power the moment you fail." Lord Kethrin hesitated. "There is more. I have received intelligence that he plans to launch an attack on Earth's outer colonies within weeks of taking the throne. He sees humanity as weak, ripe for conquest." Jake felt cold anger rising in his chest. How many people would die? Millions, possibly billions. His war plans are aggressive and brutal. Lord Kethrin looked at Sylvain. "Your Majesty, I must ask, is this bond worth risking everything? Worth risking your life and the commander's life? Because the trial of spirit has the highest death rate of all 3 trials. If you die tomorrow, Theron wins anyway." Sylvain stood, dismissing the doctor who had been treating her. "If I withdraw now, Theron takes power and humanity suffers. If I die in the trial, the same thing happens. The only path forward is to succeed." "And what if you succeed?" Lord Kethrin asked quietly. "What then?" "You will be bonded to a human, a member of a species that barely knows us. How will the Empire react? How will Earth react?" Jake stood as well. "That is a problem we will solve when we get there. Right now we need to focus on surviving tomorrow." The trial of spirit took place at dawn, in an open courtyard at the heart of the palace. The entire court gathered to witness what would likely be the final trial. Jake could see the anticipation on their faces, could feel the tension in the air. In the center of the courtyard was a small altar, holding 2 crystal vials filled with glowing liquid. This was the substance that would bring their deepest fears to life, would make them real enough to harm or kill. Jake and Sylvain stood together before the altar. They were both dressed simply, with no weapons, no armor, nothing to protect them but each other and the bond they had built. Lord Kethrin performed the ritual words, his voice heavy with concern. "The trial of spirit tests whether the bonded pair can face their deepest fears together and survive. The substance you will consume creates hallucinations drawn from your subconscious. These hallucinations can cause real harm. If your fear is fire, you can burn. If your fear is falling, you can be injured by impact. You must face these fears together for 30 minutes. If you survive, your bond is proven true." He paused. "Before you begin, I must offer you one final chance to withdraw. Commander Morrison, you are not bound by our laws. You can leave now with honor. No one would blame you." Jake looked at Sylvain. Through their mental connection, he could feel her fear, her hope, her determination. He felt his own emotions mirroring hers. They had come this far together. They would see it through to the end. "I am not leaving," Jake said. Sylvain took one of the crystal vials. Jake took the other. They drank the glowing liquid at the same time. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world began to twist and change around them. Jake saw the courtyard fade away, replaced by a dark corridor he recognized instantly. It was the hallway of his childhood home, but wrong somehow, distorted. At the end of the corridor was a door, and behind that door was everything he had ever feared. He heard screaming from behind the door, heard the sounds of violence and chaos. His father's voice angry and loud, his mother crying. His own younger self, terrified and helpless. "No," Jake whispered. "This is not real." But the door was opening anyway, and he could see inside now. He saw himself as a child, cowering in the corner while his parents fought. He saw the moment his father left and never came back. He saw his mother working herself to exhaustion, trying to support them alone. He saw every moment of poverty, every time he went to bed hungry, every time he felt worthless and small. And beneath it all was the fear that had driven him his entire adult life. The fear that he was not good enough, would never be good enough. That no matter how hard he worked or how much he achieved, he would always be that scared child who could not protect anyone. The hallway was collapsing now, the walls crushing inward. Jake felt real pain as debris hit him. This was not just a hallucination. This could kill him. Then he felt a hand grab his. Sylvain was there, even though she was fighting her own fears. Through their connection, he could see what she was experiencing. She was in the middle of a battlefield, watching her first mate die over and over again. She was powerless to save him, forced to watch the moment that had broken her heart play out in an endless loop. But she had pulled herself away from that nightmare to help him. She was holding his hand, using their connection to ground them both. "It is not real," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "These are just fears. They have no power unless we give it to them." Jake held her hand tighter. "Your fear is real too. Let me help you." They moved together, Jake pulling Sylvain away from the battlefield while she guided him away from the collapsing hallway. They supported each other, used their connection to share strength when one of them weakened. But the trial was not done with them yet. New fears emerged, more personal, more cutting. Jake saw himself failing, saw Earth burning because of his mistakes. He saw everyone he cared about dying while he stood helpless. He saw himself becoming his father, angry and violent and destroying everything good in his life. Sylvain saw herself alone forever, saw her empire crumbling because she had chosen personal happiness over duty. She saw Jake leaving her, saw him looking at her with disgust and rejection. She saw herself becoming exactly what Theron claimed she was, weak and unfit to rule. The fears circled them like predators, each one designed to break them, to make them give up. The physical danger was real. Jake felt bones breaking, felt blood running down his face. Sylvain collapsed to her knees, gasping in pain from wounds that existed only in their minds but hurt just as much as real ones. This was how people died in the trial of spirit. They gave in to the fear, let it consume them, and their bodies gave out from the trauma. But Jake would not let that happen. Not to Sylvain, not to himself. He dropped to his knees beside her, wrapping his arms around her. "Listen to me. These fears are lying. You are not weak. You are the strongest person I have ever met. You lead an empire. You face impossible decisions every day. You opened your heart even knowing the risk. That is not weakness. That is courage." Sylvain looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. "And you are not worthless. You are not your father. You have spent your entire life protecting others, serving something greater than yourself. You came to an alien world alone and faced challenges that would break most people. You are enough, Jake. You have always been enough." Their words cut through the hallucinations like light through darkness. The fears began to lose their power, began to fade. They were still there, still whispering, still trying to hurt them, but they could not anymore. Jake and Sylvain had faced them together and found that together, they were stronger than any fear. They stood up, still holding each other. The nightmare world around them was crumbling now, losing coherence. They could see the courtyard again through the cracks in the illusion. And then finally it was over. The effects of the substance wore off and they were back in the real world, battered and bleeding but alive. The court was silent. Every single person was staring at them with a mixture of awe and shock. Lord Catherine approached slowly, checking them both for injuries. "They have survived," he announced, his voice filled with wonder. "They have passed all 3 trials. The bond is proven true." The courtyard erupted in cheers so loud that Jake's ears rang. Even those who had opposed the bond seemed caught up in the moment. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something that proved the connection between Jake and Sylvain was real. Prince Theron stood up from his seat, his face twisted with rage. "This proves nothing. He is still an alien. She is still unfit to rule." But his voice was drowned out by the celebration. And when Lord Catherine called for a formal vote on whether the Queen should retain her throne, the result was overwhelming. Only a handful of court members sided with Theron. Everyone else voted to support Sylvain. Theron stormed out of the courtyard, his supporters following him. Jake knew they would be a problem in the future. But right now he could not bring himself to care. Right now all that mattered was that they had survived. Later that day, after the doctors had finished treating their injuries, Sylvain came to Jake's quarters. They sat together in silence for a long time, neither quite ready to talk about what had happened. Finally, Sylvain spoke. "I need to offer you something, Jake, a way out." Jake looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "We passed the trials. The court has accepted our bond, but I could declare it as purely diplomatic, a symbolic gesture to cement the alliance.